Listen, I don't want to be hyperbolic, but I'm a little terrified for some of you. So much so that we changed the entire course of this week's programming. Normally we react on Sunday, we predict on Tuesday, and then it's upset alert time on Thursday. We got all that out of the way. I have cleared the schedule. I have pulled up the therapist couch. We're bringing Mood Tracker back, and we're doing it right smack dab in the middle of the season. We're jam-packed high atop beautiful New York City. Reminds me so much of Harris County. There's Billy's IGA there. There's the Chevron. There's J&J. So the thing about growing up in rural Georgia is it really prepares you for life in New York City. Thursday, October 24th, the year of our Lord 2024, proudly brought to you by Academy Sports and Outdoors. Like I said, we got blue bloods in peril right now. And they're freaking out at Michigan, and they're freaking out at Florida State, and believe it or not, they have the audacity to freak out at Alabama. USC, what are we doing? Are we even going to make a bowl? What's going on here? And what's the mood? Like, what's the truth behind all of this? I will talk to you about that this afternoon. I have got Cole Cubelic coming up in. Well, you know what? Cubelic can wait as long as we need him to wait. He's probably coming up in like 30 or 40 minutes, and we're going to talk a lot. Here's a little thing to think about as we get into today's show. How do you fix chronically penalized teams? And don't just be telling me work on it. Don't just be telling me you need to emphasize it in practice, because I know good and well every one of these coaches do, and it's still a very big problem. They're watching us in Bayman, Alabama, Clovis, New Mexico, Charlotte, North Carolina, and Whitesville, Delaware. We really appreciate you guys. So I am doing the show early today, because we're going to head over to the airport and fly to Las Vegas after this, and we're going to be on the sideline for UNLV hosting Boise tomorrow night. Get your tickets if you haven't already. They're expecting the biggest crowd maybe in the history of UNLV football. How could we miss that? How could G5 Josh miss that? And then we'll fly back across the country, and we'll go to Texas Vandy on Saturday. I tell you that because the Instagram story figures to be very lively with stuff that I can get you that you won't see on the broadcast. We do it every week. If you're not following already over there, at Late Kick Josh. Also, Friday Night Lines will happen tomorrow. Wait on a posted time. It's probably not going to be as late as it normally is, because I've got stuff to do tomorrow night. So we may have ourselves one of those good old-fashioned late afternoon Friday Night Lines coming. So maybe the kids can watch. Not actually act on it because it's gambling centric, but maybe the kids can watch. Let's dive into the show. We got a lot of different directions to go. I appreciate you guys being tuned in live. Many more of you will probably watch the replay because it's the middle of a work day right now. What is the mood at Alabama? We do mood trackers all the time. We take a temperature of the fan base, and right now it is heavily dependent around Alabama football, your mood based on your age, which is not normally the way we cut the pie. Normally it's a one-size-fits-all, but you're either false alarming or you're freaking out. And basically those people who are 35 or older have lived through famine as an Alabama fan. And those who are 30 or younger, I know math, guys. I know you were technically alive when Mike Shula and maybe even Mike Dubose roamed the sidelines and Mike Price roamed the Gulf Coast. If you know, you know. But you don't really know it, because a child cannot really fully appreciate. If you don't have your driver's license yet, you can't fully appreciate the heartbreak that real living, breathing adults who have financially and emotionally invested into something as serious as a college football program can experience. And so, you are a trust fund fan. You knew the Nick Saban era Alabama Crimson Tide. And you know what? Business was good for you. Life was good for you. And they can never take it away from you. That's the good news. The other good news is they probably hired a very adequate replacement, if you ask me, in Kalen DeBoer. However, things have gotten off to a little bumpy start. So I just mentioned some names. I want to mention them again because we're talking about moods here. If you think that Alabama football is in like legitimate trouble, and by trouble, I don't mean they may not win the national title every year. I mean like real trouble. The kind of trouble they're dealing with in LA or Ann Arbor or Tallahassee. Like if you're even remotely considering approaching that opinion, stop. Just sit down or go outside and touch some grass. But if you are there, I do want to ask you, what do the names Mike Dubose and Mike Shula mean to you? What does that era mean to you? Because if you live through it, you know that it's not so bad right now. I mean, they're talking about you still on the fringes of playoff contention. You got 2 losses. You lost to Vandy. It's inexplicable, I know. You lost to Tennessee. You ran off a decade and a half's worth of a run against them, so much so that today's 18-year-old does not even know Bama-Tennessee as a rivalry. Only recently has it become competitive again. So, yeah, things aren't perfect now. But there's a long fall down the rungs on the ladder from rung 10 to rung 1, and you're on like rung 7 right now, and you think you've splattered yourself on the ground, and you really haven't. So those names, what do they mean to you? Based on what those names, Mike Dubose, Mike Shula, based on what those names mean to you, that probably determines whether you're sort of false alarm mode right now, meaning it's year one and DeBoer will get the ship righted, or you're freaking out because DeBoer is supposed to come in and seamlessly take the baton handoff like it's an Olympic marathon, and if he doesn't, then we're screwed. Is this famine? No, it is not. It is not at all. They don't know famine there. You don't know famine there. And I'm speaking to you, not authoritatively, I speak to you as your friend. You guys who are enrolled at the University of Alabama right now, ton of you listen to or watch the show. You're probably jogging around campus right now, and you want me to make you feel better? I'll make you feel better. You hired the right guy. You hired the right guy. Let me run some numbers by you right quick. So producer Jesse shoots me an email this morning. I said, give me some numbers. How bad is it really for Alabama? So producer Jesse tells me that they are 123rd in plays run against. They are 100th in plays run, so the offense isn't on the field. The defense is on the field constantly. They're 119th in the country in penalties. And so I'm asking you, is that really Kalen DeBoer's Alabama? My answer is no, very quickly. I watched the guy at multiple stops have one of the most ratcheted up programs in America and beat teams that roster-wise he had to punch up against. So do you really think that's Alabama permanently under Kalen DeBoer? You don't think that. I don't think most of you think that. I think maybe some outsiders want that to be the case. If you're an Auburn fan or an LSU, Georgia fan, whatever, you want that to be the case. But I'm not talking to you at the moment. I'm talking to just Bama fans. Do you really think that's Kalen DeBoer's Alabama? No, that's not Kalen DeBoer's Alabama. And I'm also going to leave you with this. I do believe there is a new kind of thing that's happening in college football right now. It's going to be unique. It's when a big-time program has a job opening, like Alabama, and the roster's still really good, like Alabama was. It's the portal era, and it's NIL era now. So your biggest risk when you first take over a job is all your talent leaves. It didn't used to be like that. It used to be, I mean, go watch movies or go watch documentaries of the 70s and 80s and 90s when a new coach came in. The players were like, man, I wonder what the new coach is going to be like. Well, today's player is, am I even going to stick around to see what the new coach is like? I'm about to bounce because I got 5 offers for 6 figures here that I'm going to go be a backup right guard somewhere else. So when you take that job, my point is, you want to come in, and the old school part of you wants to immediately instill toughness and discipline, and you want to install your way of doing things. But the problem is, for kids with options who have the back door open right now, they could just leave. And, you know, if you go Junction Boys mode, to steal a phrase that Alabama fans will be familiar with, if you want to go full Bear Bryant Junction Boys vibe, okay, let them leave. Well, what happens? You're so beat to death that you can't even complete a season and you're sub 500. And you're not really ready for that. You can't do that at Alabama. And my point is, I think Kalen DeBoer and his staff understood we kind of got to handle this situation with kid gloves more than we probably want to throughout pre-spring and throughout spring, so that we make sure we have a team. Because guys, even now, they're a little suspect when it comes to quality depth. Even now they are. Can you imagine if they lost a few more players? So my point there is, it'll be all right. It may be all right this year. It'll definitely be all right in years to come. It'll be all right if you head over to, let's say, Academy Sports and Outdoors, because they never dip. They're just elite every year, 5-star, they win every year. You need grilling equipment, check. Hunting equipment, check. Outdoor sporting goods, check. Just stuff to wear, outside, inside, I don't care, check. Back to school stuff, of course we know they have that. But the variety at Academy goes well beyond things that I list off the top of my head. Here's the ad read. It just says Academy. Academy foolishly sometimes trusts us to just ad-lib these ad reads, but that's because we're friends with them. And that's because we've been locked arm in arm with Academy for quite a while. Here's the thing about Academy. Those folks watch the show. I'm not necessarily going to give you the rooting interests of all the upper management at Academy, because that wouldn't be good business. But suffice it to say, they eat, sleep, and breathe and live and die with this stuff just like you do, just like I do. And so when you walk in their store, understand you're shopping almost like you're shopping amongst our family here. And the other part is they've taken it upon themselves to make the show free. So we never have to have these meetings. Like I'm in New York right now. And there are a lot of really important people in the very building I'm in, on the very floor I'm on. But we never have to have meetings with them where they say, Josh, we got to put the show behind a paywall. Josh, we're going to have to charge. It's going to have to be a subscription-based model. And the reason that we don't have to do that is because of brands like Academy, who step up and say, yeah, forget all that. Keep it free. We'll take care of it. And so they will take care of you as well. It's not a chemical plant where you say, I'm glad they made my show free. I want nothing to do with them, though. This place has stuff you need anyway. Just so happens they made the show free in the process. So check them out. And if you can't get there in person, academy.com. Let's move on. Now it goes downhill just a little bit. Just a little bit. I don't want to alarm anyone, although some of you who are not Michigan fans will take great pleasure in what we're about to do here. What's the mood with the Michigan fan base right now? I don't think this is really split. I think there are some who will admit it and some who won't admit it. It's like a cracked windshield sort of mood. The windshield, of course, is what you look out on the horizon from, and it's what is to come. The rearview mirror is wonderful because in the rearview mirror, it's kind of fading in the distance, but you can still clearly see. You see that maize and blue confetti. You see Houston, Texas. You see Jim Harbaugh on that national championship trophy. You see J.J. McCarthy. You see all that. You got your ticket stubs framed above the mantle. That's wonderful, but the rearview mirror is not the problem on the car. It is strictly a windshield problem. And when we look out of the windshield, it is very foggy, it is very cracked, and this staff does not have a grace period. You know, the other thing to remember about the mood of a Michigan fan right now, before you call them anything that you want to call them, is remember, these folks went through some trying times themselves where they thought the old staff may not be the right staff. You know, there was a time, 2020, 2021, at least going into 2021, when they thought, oh, Harbaugh may not be our guy. Well, then he was their guy all of a sudden. And then you rewrite history to make sure you've got all your tweets deleted where you called for his job, which is okay. A little unethical, but that's okay. You get a pass here. But my point with a Michigan fan, if you live in Battle Creek, Michigan, home of Rob Van Dam, if you live in Battle Creek, Michigan, you're looking around, you're saying, I had all the appreciation in the world for the previous staff. And I may have been wrong about the previous staff. But here's the thing. We call them a previous staff for a reason. They're not there anymore. Sharon Moore was on that staff, and he's been elevated to head coach here, but a lot of turnover happened. And so you're going to have to forgive Michigan fans if they don't look at this new staff and say, oh, we'll give you guys 3 or 4 years runway after all you did for us. Fact of the matter is there are some people on this current staff that did and have done a lot for Michigan football. I don't think the fan base necessarily views it in the holistic term of, well, since you guys were associated, you've got all the same kind of equity built into your longevity here as Jim Harbaugh would if he stayed here. And that may be fortunate or unfortunate depending on your perspective, but then the flip side, or I guess not the flip side, the next page of that is Harbaugh would have probably struggled this year too. If Jim Harbaugh stuck around and his whole staff stayed intact, which was unrealistic, but fantasy world for me for a second. If he sticks around, but all those guys leave who left, what is Jim Harbaugh's Michigan this year? You could argue they'd be better. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, higher quality coaching leads to a better product. Case in point, the LSU defense last year to this year. And I'm certainly not equating Michigan 2024 total staff to LSU 2023 defensive staff. But you get the point. The defense has taken a step back here, which I think may be the most cause for concern because offensively, no one expected a whole lot from this team. Granted, they're bad, but no one expected a whole lot from this team. But defense was supposed to carry it, and it's not that they're terrible, but they're not great. Their defense has not been great. What's the offense going to be in 2025? This defense loses some role players, some key role players to the NFL draft, so what will they be? And basically the concern up there, as you look out the windshield, is, I mean, is there any discernible hope on the horizon? Like, I mean, we're going to play Ohio State in another month. We're going to go into Columbus. We're going to be somewhere close to a 3-touchdown underdog in that game. And you know, some of the last holdouts will say, oh, that's okay. We were underdogs against them the past few years, and what happened? Not the same thing that'll happen this year. I just have my arms limp down by my side right now. That's not happening for you this year. Now, you can keep it close and be competitive, and that would be great. That'd be a great sign of things to come. But what if you take what's happened so far this year and then you add in a blowout loss to Ohio State and bowl game, whatever, I don't even know that matters to people anymore, and then you don't shore up the quarterback position, which seems like it's going to have to happen out of the portal right now. Are you really, if you're a Michigan fan, are you really comfortable entering another season with that level of uncertainty and understanding there are no proven commodities on this staff? I know you may look at that and think, oh, those folks are so ungrateful. They just won a title. Yes, the fan base did. This staff did not. Some holdovers on that staff, including the head coach. But top to bottom, that staff did not. And so it's okay. I think it's okay in college football, man, to look at a staff and a program and have immense appreciation, and you can even practice patience when you get the new staff in there. But this is the University of Michigan, and until the NCAA drops some massive hammer on them, there's no reason for them to look like they do this year. I understand the concept of turning the page. I understand the concept of a reload year. And you know what? Totally willing to grant that. So you don't hear me calling for anyone's job. I didn't use the phrase hot seat. I didn't do any of that intentionally. Because my mood towards them is they're bad, they're worse than they should be this year. I'm going to give them time to get it corrected because everyone deserves that amount of time. Because you know what? Sherrone Moore, no matter what staff he was on, he's a first-time head coach. There is no shortcut to learning these lessons. There is not for any of them. Kirby Smart almost lost to Nichols State his first year at Georgia, and it ended up okay for him. So my point is, you can be critical, but also have patience. You know what? I'll save that for next week. I just throwing ideas around in my mind. If we weren't live, I would just cut that little part out, but we're live, so you have to watch me think for a second. QuikTrip came along in the spring. Many of you were tuned in when we committed to QuikTrip live on the air. Since then, I am happy to report that I have received, I don't know how many thousand, Jesse, who is like 2,000 miles away from me right now. I don't know how many submissions we've received of you guys just taking pictures of yourselves in parking lots of QuikTrips. It's easily into the several thousands, and we have given away, courtesy of QuikTrip, several thousand or several hundred tanks of gas at this point, with more to come. That's not stopping. But I say all that to say, I still feel like we're just scratching the surface of what we can do with QuikTrip. And I was having a talk with someone yesterday, and it was Brent Stover. I don't need to keep his name a secret. We did Inside College Football last night. Stover, who purports to listen to the show every day, and we thank him for that. He was saying, man, QuikTrip is such a perfect partner for your audience and your show. And I'm like, yeah, they are, because we're on the road constantly. And you know who else is? Every person who owns a car. So it's our entire audience. And I appreciate you guys. I appreciate them. They make the whole new Saturday tour possible, so much so that, I hit them and I said, hey, I've got great news for us, terrible news for you. They said, what? I'm going to 2 games this week. Fill up the tank. And you know, they're legally obligated to do it because they're the presenting partner of the tour. If we want to go to the Tokyo Dome to watch a game, they legally have to send us to the Tokyo Dome. That's the way that sponsorships and partnerships work. So we appreciate them. We're headed to Vegas tonight. We'll be on the sideline for UNLV, hosting Boise tomorrow night, and then we'll go to Nashville. Some would call it home, but we're going to call it the spot where Texas is playing Vanderbilt Saturday, and it's all courtesy of QuikTrip. Just keep an eye out when you're on the old intro state for that QuikTrip sign. And you know what? You got to go to the bathroom. If you still got a quarter tank, just hold out. There'll be a QuikTrip eventually. And if not, let me know, and we'll see about getting one built there. I can't make final decisions on that, but we'll see. You know what? Since we're going almost to California tonight, let's just go the rest of the way. The mood around USC is tense. Is it too tense? I don't know, because that's for the fan base to decide. But the mood around USC football right now is they don't feel like they're built for a rebuild. And it is an age-old conundrum that you find when you have a coach like Lincoln Riley who gets a few years into his tenure and then he realizes the presets are not right. So the way I initially set things up when I took over this job, I didn't do it right. To get specific, He hired poorly on the defensive side of the ball. And then he realized that. He probably already knew it. He did something about it this past winter. Alex Grinch is out. He brings in D'Anton Lynn from across town. They massively upgrade the defensive staff. It's already had great returns. They are much, much improved on that side of the ball. So why does it sound so doom and gloom in the mood tracker? Well, the problem is they've lost 4 games already this year. And the fan base looks around and says, wait a second. It's not year 1, it's year 3. Who in the world that's a major program gets to talk about rebuilding in year 3? It's a totally fair and valid argument. From the guy who preaches patience all the time. If you're a University of Southern California football fan and you're looking at your head coach, you spent a lot of money on him through your program, and you brought him in and there were these sky-high expectations and you were sold this bill of goods on what's going to happen when USC football fuses and merges with the new NIL and portal landscape, and you're in year 3, losing 4 games before Halloween and being sold on a rebuild, you got a problem. And you got a reason to view it as a problem. So I don't have an issue with people who feel that way. But it's a year 1 vibe, and it's the right vibe, but it's 2 years too late. And so I see both sides of this. Now, I sit in Nashville normally. That's where I live, and it's easy for me to look across the country and say, look, I mean, so what he made some poor hires, so what they got out of the gate on the wrong foot. I mean, let him rebuild the program. It's easy for me to say that. I'm not a season ticket holder. I mean, I don't have a closet full of USC gear. I'm not a season ticket holder. I'm not a booster. I'm not anything like that. So that's easy for me to say. But if you are one, if you're out there living in Rancho Cucamonga and you go to the Coliseum 8 times per year and you're kind of fed up with year 3, that's when you're going to rebuild? How about when you first get here? I can't argue with you, but I will make this pitch. If you feel that way, hit pause on your feeling and bite the bullet for just a second. Just humor me. Let's say you're a USC fan and you decide, even though it shouldn't have taken to year 3, at least Lincoln Riley saw things the right way in year 3. At least he made the right staff moves. At least he's talking about recruiting pass rushers now. You know, all this stuff should have been day 1 stuff. I'm not arguing to you about that. I'm asking, can you bite the bullet for just a second? And can you just clench your fist and say, okay, well, at least he sees it now. So at least we're on the right trajectory now. If you're willing to meet me there for argument's sake, this is what it should look like. If you're going down that road, it is what it should look like. Because, yeah, they've lost 4 games. They've all been 1-possession losses. They have led in the 4th quarter of each of those games. So there's a world where this is a 1-loss team. There's a world where this is an undefeated team, honestly. And it's not all that different than what the current state of the program or the team is. The thing about it is, you're judging on wins and losses. So close losses are losses. And I get that. I'm not trying to sell you otherwise. I'm just saying it's not a terrible spot to be in. And there are a lot of reasons for optimism. But as much as I say that, there is one point of caution that you have to make with calculating the future of USC football. See, I believe in Lincoln Riley. Like, I'm the guy a few years ago who said, I think he can win a national championship. I still feel that way. I don't think this USC program is miles away. I think in the aggregate, it is now heading in the right direction. It will not happen overnight. So all that's well and good. But there is a misnomer that just because you hire right and just because you say the right things and then you initially see the inertia start to change, that you get to like place a bookmark every night and you get to start a new chapter the next day. That's not the way this works. The way this works is it's a minefield every day. You don't make a certain amount of progress and then get to, all right, let's put the bookmark there. Let's close the book of progress for today and we'll open it right back up tomorrow where we started. You can still fall. It's a very treacherous climb. That's why it's so hard to do. That's why a bunch of programs have found ways to wander in the wilderness for a long time. Tennessee football is a very good example. You know, you start to make couple of days, couple of weeks, couple of months worth of progress, and then boom, That's how easy it can happen. So that's the great uncertainty with Lincoln Riley right now. I can believe all I want to in the guy. I can believe in the vision. I can believe in the hires. I believe in all of those things. I can still believe that the recruiting profile can be rectified out there. But there is no guarantee, even if you're right on all that it'll work out. So college football does not have bookmarks. It's not the way it works. It would be wonderful if it did, because that would mean you could save all your progress and you could just take that for granted, and that was the default position you could work off of. Nope. Doesn't work that way. Does not work that way. They're watching us in Hernando, Mississippi, Carroll, Iowa, Athens, Georgia, and Columbia, South Carolina. We appreciate you guys. Now, I'm going to take a little sip of coffee, not from the chalice, unfortunately, just a common old styrofoam cup here. But that's why we're wearing the black shirt. We wear the darks on the road. We wear the whites at home. And every one of you who made fun of that suit I was wearing last night, I forgive you. I don't forget, but I forgive you. I am whomst I am. I don't know what else to tell you. I am whomst I am. Not an English major. Clemson football is the shark fin off the shore of college football right now. They are in full-on stealth support mode. That's the mood around Clemson. Stealth support. And that is basically where you stay quiet. You put your hand over your mouth. You pump your fist under the table, because you know that Georgia body bagged you in week 1. No one wants to revisit that, but it happened. And then everyone forgot about you. Everyone tossed you on the scrap heap, maybe including me. And that's a fact. But there's another fact, and that is, if you tossed Clemson on the scrap heap after week 1, all you did was toss Dabo Swinney right into his wheelhouse. That guy wants to live on the margins and on the fringes. He wants to be doubted. That is his fuel. Little old Clemson was a phrase that didn't exist 15 years ago, and he came along and basically invented it. And in the process, all they did was build a powerhouse program, beat Alabama twice in national championship matchups, which I still think is one of the most underappreciated chapters in color television college football history. No one else did it. No one else did it. In a world where it shrank so much, the prism of who can and can't win at the highest level shrank so much, that guy went to a non-blue blood, having never been a head coach, and ended up creating a model and fostering a culture that not only was able to meet Alabama in big moments, they beat them twice, and the third time was a really good game. So the mood there is sort of matching what's happened after the Georgia game. Nobody's mentioning them. I think LSU and Clemson, I'm going to talk to Cubelic about that in a little while. I think they're the two wild card teams kind of down the old stretch in college football this year, because they're the teams that technically have enough talent on the roster that if things fall into place, they could really surprise some people. I'm not sure, as fun as some of these Big 12 teams are, I'm not sure that they have the overall speed and raw talent and athleticism prerequisites to make noise deep into the playoff. But Clemson does. LSU does. There is, let's say if, I'm not going to speak in definitives, if there's no elite team out there, and many of us are buying into that working theory, well, then that means the door is cracked for not everyone, but several more teams than usual. Someone could kick that thing down, and it can be Clemson. But you got to be careful, because I want you to remember Texas. It won't be hard for you, because it was just last week. It was 5 days ago, as we sit here right now talking on Thursday, when Georgia went into Austin, really reminded Texas, you're not there yet. And that hurt, because Texas looked like they were there. Texas believed they were there. Texas was favored against Georgia in Austin, and the eyes of the entire world were on the University of Texas, and they fell and got physically owned in the process. And that sounds a lot like what happened to you in week 1 against Georgia. There is a world where Clemson is still fraudulent. I don't want to live in that world. I happen to like Clemson. I happen to want them to do good things. But we got to be careful, because you haven't played much of anyone. There's the schedule. And after the Georgia game, what it looked like in the preseason was, ooh, man, they're going to play Georgia. And then App State's not one to be trifled with. Turns out they are. Ooh, NC State, sleeper in the ACC. No, they're just asleep. There's a big difference. Stanford, Florida State, and so no one's tested you. You know my Usain Bolt theory. If Usain Bolt showed up to a middle school track and field event, he would smoke all the little children. He's still Usain Bolt. Just because he didn't race against anyone doesn't make him any less a world-class sprinter. However, I could also show up to a middle school track and field event and smoke those kids, and would happily do so for free. I would not be a world-class sprinter. I would just look like one. Is Clemson Usain Bolt, or is Clemson me? Perfect out-of-context clip for later. But the difference could be, if you want to take the negative tone here, the only difference in Texas and Clemson may be when they play Georgia, as it turns out. Now, I happen to still own stock in both of these teams, so I am not personally raining on your parade. I'm just saying someone else could walk in the door, like Dark JP could walk in the door and make that point, and I'd say, shame on you, but you may be right. But shame on you anyway. There is no Miami on their schedule. They got the best odds to win the ACC right now. There's no Miami. There's no SMU. I think they do play Pitt, but we are also in a potential world where we have 3 unbeaten teams in the ACC, at which point all-out chaos unfolds. And you want to just go, before we bring Cubelic in, if you want to go full-on sicko mode, I mean, if you want to really, really if you want to feel better about yourself, let's say you've had a bad week. Let's say things aren't great at home. The finances aren't exactly in order. There's trouble at work. Man, you're still not Florida State football. Florida State, the mood around there is just numb. The fan base is numb. People in the administration, how can you ever make sense of this? It is so far off the chart. Like, if I were to chart all of the examples, all of the outcomes we've gotten, all of the historical data points of any other team that's existed in history, expectation versus result. You've got the piece of paper, and then well off that piece of paper, that's where the dot is for Florida State circa 2024. I don't even know what to make of it. They are so bad, like they are so beyond the pale of believability. And I should know, because I bet on them last week. Colin, that's the Duke game, right? Yeah, so I'm watching this game last week. I mean, I actually am someone who has bet money on Florida State plus 3.5. And you know what the thing about it is? It was the right side technically. It was just they were minus in turnovers, and we've come to know a long time ago, if you bet this sport, if you bet sports period, you understand. I mean, there are outlier results, and there are randomized statistical categories that no predictive model could account for. Turnovers are one of them, except with Florida State, it happens every week. With Florida State, the receivers fight the ball in the air every week. They are so situationally unaware. They're an ignorant football team. I'm not calling the people on the team ignorant, but collectively, as a team, they are very, very bad. And the reason that's shocking is because of where they ended last season. And we're coming to learn, using FSU as the poster child for this, that in the new age of college football, especially when you lean on the portal, there is no limit. There's no ceiling and there's no floor. It could be great. You could go win a national title. If Jordan Travis had not gotten hurt last year, maybe they would have. There's no ceiling on how high you can climb as a team. But man, there's no floor. There is no basement. There is no level under the basement. You could fall so hard and so fast. We do best, worst, and most likely scenarios every summer. I don't remember off the top of my head what we said the worst case was for Florida State. It's not even close to this. It was so far beyond the realm of believability that they could be this bad. It just beyond total bust. So I don't think that this is all Mike Norvell. I'm going to get a lot of pushback on that. I mean, Florida State fans are ready to run him out of town just months after he signed a brand new contract extension down there, which makes it not feasible in all likelihood. But even if it was feasible, there's just no way that you can sell me on the idea that this is all Mike Norvell. He's responsible for it all. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But if we're really getting down to brass tacks, as Meemaw would say, there's got to be so much more in the equation than just Mike Norvell fooled us last year. It was all Jordan Travis's doing, and he's really a below-average head coach that just lucked his way into this position. I don't believe that. Having said that, I also don't know how they fix it, because this is so far off the comparable data point chart that I start asking myself, is it possible to be so bad? I'm asking this about Auburn and Hugh Freeze right now. Another dude that I actually believe in, I think he's the right guy for the job. Is it possible for things to be so bad that you get yourself beyond the ability to reach the reset button or the flush button? You know, because Florida State, if they go 6-6 or 7-5, it's a vast underachievement of a season, considering you were favored to win the conference. But you could at least hit flush, get the bad taste out of your mouth, have yourself a good spring, sign a good class, and we're ready to go right back there the next year. I don't know how they do that. I have no idea how they do that. But maybe we are still to learn that in this era, not only can you go from total boom to total bust, you can go right back to total boom again. That doesn't seem realistic to me, but who knows? Who knows? It feels like we're in a documentary in real time. It feels like the 2040 version of ourselves is watching a documentary from the 2020s and how much change and upheaval there was in college football, but we don't know that, like, we're in it as we speak. We're in like chapter 4 of that documentary. The best we can do is hope to financially benefit from it. And so that is why over at FanDuel, they are our exclusive odds provider, first off. And that is why this is the last weekend, but that is why you can go over there right now. Any new sign up, bet 5 to win 300. I had one of the most nightmarish stories ever sent to me. I'm going to tell it because I've had many, many more good stories. But all you have to do on this bet 5 to win 300 is sign up, use the QR code there, sign up, and you're good. You just bet 5 and you'll win 300 if your bet hits. If your bet hits is the optimal word there. You don't even have to bet the spread. You can just bet money line. So I told you the other day, guys, game the system here. Like, work the system. Go find the biggest money line favorite you can bet. Bet $5 on the money line. It wins. You get 300. One of our viewers went and bet Liberty, who was favored by nearly 4 touchdowns against Kennesaw State last night. They lost. They lost. I don't know if you DVR'd the game and you hadn't seen it yet. They lost. And I can't help but feel partially responsible. I'm not returning his $5, but I can't help but feel partially responsible. Now, several more of you have sent your winning tickets and you got 300, I think because you believed I was lying to you that it would happen. I'm not. You just have to win. So tread lightly. Like Ohio State on the money line against Nebraska. I think it's safe. I feel like it's safe. But I felt like Liberty was pretty darn safe last night as well. Now, I've got 2 added best bets on the Ramen Noodle Express, and then we're going to bring Cubelic in here. And if I don't tell you again, I appreciate you watching. So, the games we're already on. We're on SMU minus 11.5 against Duke. We're on UTSA minus 7.5 against Tulsa. Sam Houston dropped the ball for us fantastically a couple of nights ago, so we're already 0-1 on the weekend. Minnesota minus 4.5. We're on favorites exclusively so far. And we're going to be on one more here, but we are going to be on a dog. So we're adding West Virginia plus 3.5. They're playing Arizona. And we're laying 2.5. Toledo minus 2.5. That's where we'll be on that one. We are going to do Friday Night Lines at some point tomorrow from Las Vegas, as it turns out. I think it'll be a little bit earlier in the day. You need to make sure you're following Instagram and Twitter. Instagram at LateKickJosh, Twitter, Josh Pate CFB, because I will put the time out there. I just don't know what time it's going to be quite yet. But there you go. SMU, UTSA, West Virginia, Toledo, Minnesota. And we'll probably be on 4 or 5 more before kickoff on Saturday. All right. I hear Cubelic knocking on the door. Always appreciate him joining us. Got some interesting things to talk about. Recorded this earlier today, so I kind of already know where it's going to go, so I know it's going to be pretty good. Appreciate you guys. Here is our chat weekly with Cole Cubelic.
Cole Cubelic is doing Texas Vanderbilt this Saturday. I will be at Texas Vanderbilt this Saturday. I know you can get awkward sometimes in person, so it could be that you have to walk past me a couple of times before you even make eye contact. But this is going to be a game that has the nation's interest. Not that all of the games don't, but Texas goes into a place that was already a minefield for Alabama. Texas coming off a loss to Georgia. I'm doing Inside College Football last night. They're teeing up the question, could it actually happen? Could the unthinkable happen? Well, the line's 18.5, so we have bigger upsets than that every Saturday. So let me ask you about Texas, because I gave my thoughts earlier this week. Do you think any differently of them, or how differently do you think of them, if you do, coming off the Georgia game as opposed to what you thought about them going in?
I do feel a little bit different. I thought that was a game, Josh, where Georgia came in with the mentality of we're going to prove that I can't really think of the exact word to use, but I used rugged this week, which essentially piling together, more physical, more intense, maybe have a little bit more of an edge.
A rigidity.
Yeah, the only way that, I mean, in football world, we would describe it as more MFers on that team. And so I think they came in to kind of prove that, and they did. So my only concern, though, with Texas off of that would be, are there enough other areas in which they can impose their will on a team where they can go take a game, so to speak? So if they're playing Miami or they're playing Ohio State and that thing's kind of even in all aspects, do they have enough guys where they can say, this group or this part of our team is going to go take over this football game? They're going to go get that game for us, because I think a lot of us thought the offensive line, along with the tight ends, could sort of do that if they needed to. But they might not be that kind of a group up front offensively. Defensively, I think they still can be, but that would probably be. And then, two, they got to push the ball down the field more. Like all of you and I talked about it, the detachments, and we talked about it on Read and React Monday night. The backs out of the backfield, the tight ends out of the backfield. For the most part, Georgia defended those very, very well, tackled well in the open field. Now, they got 2 touchdowns down in the red zone off of them, but that wasn't something that Texas lived on in that game. You have these athletes at receiver, this speed at receiver, you're going to have to attack down the field. It can't just all be slants and balls out in the flat to create your explosive plays. So that's something I want to make sure that Texas is still going to be capable of doing.
I think the way they pull that off, if Vandy were to, be in that thing mid-fourth quarter, is what you just said. So you've got a box score in front of you that shows Texas's longest pass play is 32 yards or something like that. Vandy's made them go on sustained 8, 9, 10 play drives in order to get in the end zone. And in the course of doing that, you sort of revisit what bit them last week. 4 turnovers against Georgia. Georgia's got 6 scoring drives. 4 of them begin in Texas territory. Another one starts on the Georgia 45. Look, you mentioned something with Texas there. So in the preseason, when you're looking for dominant units, you talk about offensive line a lot. You're on the Joe Moore Award committee. You played the position. Do you find it, maybe you don't find it interesting. I always find it interesting how we always want to grade these by unit. Very rarely does the college football, public at large break down individual offensive linemen. It's all the collective. It's the unit. We think this is the best O-line, second best O-line. And then, when you guys meet for the Joe Moore Award, or when you're just breaking down offensive line, you find it interesting how rarely you look at a 1 through 5 across the front group in college football and find yourself saying, they're exactly what I thought they'd be in the preseason. Everybody across that line's playing up to standard. It's always, but it's all, even with LSU, like with the tackles this year, there were preseason all whatever everywhere. And it's not that they're bad. Like, it's not that Campbell's bad. It's not anything like that. But the talk around them right now seems to be, yeah. I mean, they could be, but they're not quite yet. And the same has been the case with Georgia. Does that strike you? Is that the way you feel like it goes every season?
A lot of times. I think there were a couple of outliers with some Alabama teams in the later third of the Saban run. Yep. A couple of these Michigan teams the last few years, we have essentially known they were going to be really good, and then they've been really good. The year Quentin Nelson was coming back for Notre Dame, that was one that probably lived up to the standard and the hype. But you're right. It's and then there are some that you project a little bit further ahead when people say, they will just laugh at you, like Tennessee. And I do think that Tennessee was kind of on an upward trend, leveled out, and maybe on a small downward trend now. Some of that's injuries. Some of that is guys just not wanting to play football. But, you didn't see Lance Hurd at left tackle against Alabama start the game. So I think some of that has to do with it. Georgia would be more injury related. And they've had a couple groups recently that we thought were going to be really good and that sort of maintain that standard. But like with LSU, they're playing great football. It's just some of this too, Josh, is circumstance and opportunity.
Sure.
So it's no different than Joe Burrow going in his senior year. Everybody says, man, he got so much better. Well, no, he was given opportunities to do things he could already do. He just didn't get, he was a short yardage back the year before in 2018. LSU, that offensive line is not getting a chance to impose their will in the run game. They're great in pass pro, but LSU doesn't run the ball a whole lot. So I think it's like you go back to a couple Bama O-lines that were dominant, but Tua is the quarterback, and they're getting double teamed 6 yards down the field, and here comes the slant over their head. And Saban would even address that and say, what would you do after the 8th or 9th time in a game that you crush somebody and they keep throwing passes over you? He's like, inherently, you're going to say, We don't need to do that on this play. So a lot of it is very different than we thought. A lot of it, I think now more than ever, you're going to see groups slowly improve over the course of the season. Ohio State's group, and it's unfortunate they lose their left tackle. They're getting a little better and better. I think A&M's a group that's kind of slowly ascending. Florida group's a lot better than it was weeks 1 and 2. So I think you'll see more of that. And then some of the ones that we just kind of take Ole Miss, for example. I mean, they're already all pissed at me anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Everybody just thought we took 2 guys from last year's Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line, so we're good. Yeah, we got a good offensive line, and it does not really work that way. There's continuity that comes with it, feel, understanding, and so that's a group that has struggled for a lot of this season. So, yeah, it's definitely not check the boxes of what we thought, and it's all working out that way.
You were talking about LSU there. I think LSU, to me, is the biggest wild card team in this whole picture right now. There are flaws we're figuring out about teams. There are strengths either that we thought that have been validated or are starting to scale to what they should have been all along. With LSU, what was interesting about that Arkansas game last week, as opposed to the Ole Miss game the week before, is it should have been a bad spot for LSU. And even if they win that game, I thought dogfight win. And not only did they go in there against a rested Arkansas team with all the motivation in the world, they handled the game. They outrushed Arkansas. They ran the ball as well as they have all season. They shut Arkansas down on the ground. The defensive staff there has been able to generate pressure. The players, courtesy of the defensive staff, has been able to generate pressure. And so you combine that with 3 really dependable pass catchers, good tight end, and then you've got a quarterback that I'm not going to call him an unknown. I'm going to call him, right along with the team, a big wild card, because if Garrett Nussmeier has a hot November, like LSU could be in Atlanta. LSU could be playing for and competing for the SEC championship. And I will admit that's not something I thought I'd be saying when I watched them barely survive South Carolina a few weeks ago. But that's the beauty of college football, in that you've got still a very developmental style game. And some of these teams do this crazy thing and they get better over the course of a season. That's the team I've got right now. To a certain degree, Clemson as well. But LSU is by far my biggest wild card team in this picture, because unlike some of these other teams whose ceiling may still be a little beneath that of a national championship contender, if all the pieces fell into place for LSU and you fast forwarded to January, you wouldn't shock me showing them in semifinal contention.
No, and I'll tell you that here's one of the things that I can remember having long conversations about 5 years ago, 6 years, 7, 8 years ago, that is still omnipresent in college football. Your first 3 or 4 games, the actual game reps, and I've talked to players about this kind of got going. Remember Trey Smith had the blood clot deal?
Yeah.
And he did not practice during the week. And so he finally comes back week 4 or 5, whatever it was. He didn't play well. Well, then all of a sudden, week 8, I mean, he was literally that guy that looked like a character on Street Fighter that was throwing people around. And we had them late in the season. And I said, were your game reps essentially practice reps? And he said, yeah, I had to use those because I wasn't going out there and practicing. Well, it's a little bit different, but it's not, where there's so little contact in fall. The only way to get good up front, offense or defense, is to do it in full pads, full speed against people trying to make you look bad. Well, that's so limited now that a lot of people don't have a feel of what it is or who they are or what they are. So it takes 3-4 games along with those game reps and then more practice reps to get to what you're talking about. Better, improve, actually, and know what the guy next to you is going to do and not do and what he needs help with. So, and quarterbacks, receivers getting on the same page. That physicality takes time to get a feel for. I'm with you on LSU. I think running back hasn't been healthy. They're starting to figure that out a little bit. They got aliens at wide receiver. Yeah. You're not going to really be able to just match up with them out there. And like you said, the tight end can work the middle of the field and the flat. Defensively, though, is what I really like. I mean, you got a legit edge presence now with number 4. 40 is turning into a game wrecker. Like Weeks is one of those guys we talked about earlier that can take over a game, because I don't think that he is the most assignment sound linebacker or the most read the keys and react linebacker. He's see ball, get ball, go attack. Yeah. And that entire defense, this is a little hard to explain because it feels super elementary. But when I watch LSU, what I feel like Blake Baker has done is gotten them to buy into, at full speed, attacking the football. And I think last year it was a little bit kind of like wait, leverage the sideline, stay in your gap, stay in your space. I think Blake Baker's like, hey, man, here's the gasoline, pour it on your hair, light it on fire, and just go rip and try to knock somebody down. And they do that, and it's working for them. So the biggest concern would be that Garrett Nussmeier thinks he can fit the ball in any humanly space possible. And so he's going to throw 2 or 3 to the other color jersey. And there was a couple last week that weren't caught. So if those are caught down the road, that could be an issue. But, man, they feel like a team that's just slowly starting to figure themselves out more and more each year. I'm going to give you Clemson.
Yeah.
Because if you get a quarterback that has the talent and ability that learns how to take care of the football, and you've heard me say it, I always feel like that turnover chromosome, like you can't rewire that DNA. It's either in you or it's not, but you can limit it. And if he learns to limit it with some pretty good skill and a front seven that can still take over a game, that's one that I could see sort of getting into a situation. And I'll give you Boise too, because I think that they can play a different style of football. Now, I don't think the defense is athletic enough to maybe beat a lot of these teams we're talking about, but if you're talking about making a run, I do think Boise might be able to be that team. It's weird that you said, because there's I could make a case for Iowa State a little bit, but defense, athleticism, speed, really worried about it. I feel like Texas A&M, if you get the Missouri Connor Wigman, they can beat anybody in America.
Oh, yeah.
That D-line can take over a game.
Yeah. That game this weekend, I'm glad they play each other, LSU and A&M. I asked Tuesday night, and it's been 48 some odd hours. I still can't answer this question. Do I trust Connor Wigman? Because I've watched him throw multiple interceptions in several games. Yeah. He threw, I think, 2 picks and probably 4 more interceptable balls against Mississippi State last week. So I'm fresh off watching him just carve up Missouri, and I want to believe, and they won the game last week, but if I just copy paste that performance, they're not winning enough of them. I'll tell you another one before we move on here. I'm going to call Miami a wild card team, and people may scoff at that because they're already ranked high. But I don't think the defensive effort they're given right now is going to wash in the playoffs, like against a Georgia or against fill in blank, whoever you think they play. You remember 2019 and 2023 LSU respectively. So 2019 LSU, they start the season and then it starts to grow to a boil, and Joe Burrow becomes what he is, and Clyde Edwards-Helaire and all those receivers. But they weren't great defensively at the beginning of the year, and they never became great statistically. But what they did become is very opportunistic. They became a really good situational team, really good red zone team, and they ended up becoming one of the best teams of all time. 2023 LSU also has a Heisman contender that ends up winning the Heisman at quarterback, but they are so off the cliff horrific defensively that it basically wastes that season. And so I think about Miami right now, and they're a wild card. You don't have to become 2019 LSU to go down the road of 2019 LSU. They're going to go down one of those 2 divergent paths, and I can't figure out which one it's going to be right now.
Here's what you need. You need really good veteran college football players at certain spots, and 2019 is a perfect example of that. Now, Patrick Queen was big-time talent. Yep. But Jacoby Stevens, great college football player who played like every position in the secondary. Neil Farrell Jr., Rashard Lawrence, both veteran D tackles who had great seasons that year. Like Braden Fajoko played really well for them that year. They had guys like Glenn Logan that helped them out. I had to go back and look up these names because I had forgotten about them. Did they have a Derek Stingley Jr.? Yeah, but you had some top-end talent. Caleb on Chason turned into a legit edge guy on that team, but you got to have that solid foundation, and I think LSU has a couple of those guys defensively right now. But two, I think about matchups, and I know you're an Iowa State nerd, but I've kind of taken a dive into them here in the last couple of weeks to see a little bit more about them. I feel like I'm watching one of these Brock Purdy Iowa State teams, like 2 and 3 tight ends. The run scheme is incredible with fullbacks and tight ends moving around. They're blocking back on people, different type gap scheme runs, efficient at quarterback. They have a couple backs that have real juice. Like I said, athleticism defensively, I would be concerned about, but I know they could slow the game down against a lot of people and be a problem with how they would move the ball on offense. I think what you're saying about Miami, and I'm with you, like Miami to me is an and one team. That's what they are. Like, if you want to talk about the behind the back 360 dunks and like 3-pointers from half court, they will wow you from start to finish. Speed, athleticism, side, arm angle throws, catches, all of that, like guys rushing off the edge. I don't know if it's as much effort, in my opinion. It's just there's a lot of it that looks sloppy. And for a team that's sitting there at 7-0, ranked in the top 5 most of the year, how could you say they're sloppy? But they're so athletic, so fast that they kind of get away with it. And they got a quarterback that can just, he's like hot sauce running point. I mean, he can just make it happen. So if they continue to find ways to sort of clean it up a little bit, Miami's going to be hell on wheels come playoff time.
Yeah. All right. I was listening to you earlier this week. You were talking to Trent Dilfer, but this is a conversation that's been going on since the beginning of time. Penalties. Teams that suffer chronic penalties every week, it's like 9 for 96 yards, 11 for 110 yards. And every time a coach steps to the podium, it's, well, we got to clean it up. Well, we got to work on it. We emphasize it in practice. And I've started to develop a theory here. I'm not going to say that heavily penalized teams is a totally randomized stat, but it's starting to feel like turnovers to me. It's starting to feel like the kind of thing where any given year, you may just be on the bad side of it, or any given year, you may have a collection of guys that for whatever reason is 38% more predisposed to mental errors or physical errors, and you emphasize it the same way you always have. You use the same blueprint you did in 2018 or 2021 when you had a good year, and you're not having a good year, and you're doing everything you know to do. And I know you talk to coaches about this all the time. There is no blueprint out there. No one knows. No one has any concept of an idea about, there's no consultant, in other words, that you bring in and he just tells you, here's how you eliminate penalties. Because if that existed, no one would be penalized. I mean,
that guy would be rich, by the way.
Yeah,
like,
dude.
can you imagine if Steve Shaw started a flag disposal consulting firm and he comes walking in there? All right, guys, here's how you get rid of your holding penalties. It's amazing because we sit down with these coaches on Fridays, and over the years, we've had plenty that are just brutalized weekly by penalties. And you stole the words out of my mouth when we talked about this earlier. The coaches, it's always, well, we address it, we emphasize it. If you heard, one thing that was cool is if you missed the interview with us on McElroy and Cubelic in the morning, McElroy said, I view it the same way as turnovers. The more you start talking about it, the more you start turning the ball over. Penalties, the more you start talking about it, the more penalties guys have. I do think style of team plays into that. Like Tennessee's going to get some because of pace of play. Georgia, a perfect example. Maybe not every week, but when you overemphasize your grit, your toughness, your physicality for one game, you're going to get some of the stuff that they got last week.
Yeah, but there's such a difference in the toughness, personal foul, go a little bit past the point of no return stuff versus procedural stuff. 5 false starts per game. I mean,
that
can't. Someone to tell me how to stop that.
That kind of stuff is coaching, and I think you can simplify snap count. I think you can simplify how you get if you huddle, how you get out of the huddle. So maybe it's going to. I think it costed Alabama in the Tennessee game. First off, I think that crowd was a big problem for the operation of the Alabama offense. Yep. I saw multiple snaps where left guard is coming off the ball first, or left guard, left tackle first, or the 2 tackles are off, but the guards aren't coming off. Like it was not where it needed to be as far as guys on the same page. But then 2, you're giving those guys, because I thought Brailsford missed an opportunity to change up. I can't say snap count because it's silent, but the way I did it a long time ago, I looked at my legs, quarterback lifted his leg, you came up, you snapped the ball. They almost mirrored each other every time he did it in that game. Well, hell, James Pierce sees 2 or 3 of those. He knows when to go based on when the head comes up, which is why guys started letting the guard look and then tap the center so he could see everything. But I would tell my guys, like, hey, man, you got to hold your water here. I was going to hold the snap for a while after I took my head up. And I would say, I said go, and I snapped the ball. So I'd be like, go. And I would bob my head on purpose, trying to get him to jump. But then also I was like, be ready to go. Be ready to go. It's going to be quick. And I'd look down real slow, and I'd come up slow, and bam, I'd snap the ball right there. You've got to vary that a little bit. But I think when you try to vary it, that's when, things kind of get out of whack. So you could simplify it with getting to the line of scrimmage earlier, not being as much of a hurry. Maybe don't have as many checks at the line of scrimmage. Like Sark calls them, call and runs. When I had him for the Mississippi State game, I asked him, all right, he was on the field. Anything different for Arch last minute? He goes, the only thing is we're going to have a lot of call and runs early. So you come in and, you call, 28 toss. It's not green or gold, which way or the other, or maybe get to this, or you got an RPO off that, or throw the uncovered here. You run 28 toss.
Yeah.
Because there's no confusion. There's no nothing. But I agree with you. Like, the one thing about the Georgia deal is, like, guys coming in with their heads down, like, that can be corrected. That needs to be corrected. But yeah, the operational stuff, I just think it's focus. I think it's understanding, repetition. And a lot of those guys had not been to Neyland. I know I keep leaning on that game, but Brailsford didn't know how loud it was going to be. That coaching staff didn't have an exact feel for what that was going to be like. So I would just say simplify things. You simplify your process as much as possible is the only way to clean them up from that perspective.
Cube Show. How we doing on YouTube? Where are we at right now? We at 15K yet?
No, God, no. I think we're only at, like, closing in on 13,000. Yeah, yeah. We did have a nice bounce back video this week, so I appreciate you for that. Not that you had anything to do with it. I think it was probably the content, but yeah, we're up a smidge. I mean, we're not celebrating 300,000, throwing that in people's face, but
Yeah, I can't help but feel
12-6.
So 15K, the drive for 15K continues, people. Cube Show, a good quality, wholesome, meat on the bone, free college football talk. It's right here on the YouTubes for you. Cube Show.
I've even stopped cussing.
Good. There was a little too much of a rigidity to the channel, and now it's fit for all ages. Good.
I was trying to be Georgia for a little bit. I need to know my role. Yeah. I'm not Georgia of podcasting. That's not true. Hey, before we go, I did want to say, and God, just so the folks know, I hate this. I was really proud of you last night. It was really cool to see you in that spot at the desk there at CBS with all the big boys. The suit, feel like we got some work to do there. It felt like a late night Target run. I'm gonna be honest with you. Maybe Miss Savannah just kind of like popped in and picked something up. Like, we don't really care about how it fits. Just, hey, will this work? Sure, throw it in the bag. Why not?
Those were the exact words. You got the transcript from the visit. So yeah, appreciate that.
But it was awesome seeing you, man. Seriously, I'm proud of you. That was really cool.
I appreciate it. We'll take a picture this weekend. How about that?
Ooh, okay. We'll be
there.
there.
We go. Cole Cubelic, Josh Pate. We appreciate it, guys. Make sure you are subscribed to his channel and this channel. We will be, in Vegas tomorrow for UNLV Boise State. We'll be in Vandy along with our boy here Saturday for Texas Vanderbilt. So make sure at Late Kick Josh, you're following that Instagram story. Should be pretty lively. And we'll do Friday Night Lines at some point. We just got to clarify when. Until then, take care. God bless.